Well, thank you, Dr. Edwards, for that wonderful introduction. You know, it's almost embarrassing. I just do things that interest me. I don't really think about the consequences, which can be, I suppose, both a good thing and a bad thing. At any rate, welcome. I'm so happy that you were able to come this afternoon and give me the opportunity to talk about my passion, which is my work. So, this afternoon is a little bit different from other presentations that I've given in the past, in that this project is still ongoing. So I'm talking about things that have happened in, if you will, the recent past, and we're looking toward the future for, if you will, the next phases of the endeavor. So here we go. Move things forward, maybe. In theory, that should work. There we go. That looks better. So, to tell, and to historians, doesn't matter which discipline you're in, it's about the story, and we love to tell stories. So my relationship with cohorts at the University of Cape Coast in the central region of Ghana. Cape Coast is 2 hours north along the Atlantic coast from Accra, the capital. If I were going to describe Cape Coast, it would be Ghana's equivalent of Ann Arbor. It's a college town. It's been made famous, or maybe infamous, because of Cape Coast Castle and the slave trade. So in fact, there are actually 2 castles that served as dungeons, portals for African and Caribbean slaves from the continent eventually to this country. So some of the, if you will, the key indicators are here on the screen. Let's see, Ghana, British colony, and like many, received independence in the late 1950s and early 60s. Okay. So Cape Coast, founded in 1962, and there are many parallels between University of Cape Coast and our institution. It was founded, just like Wayne State, 150 years ago, to fill a need with respect to teacher education. And it has grown exponentially since its founding in 1962. So now it boasts, like our own institution, a medical school, programs in pharmacy, a huge center for education research, and humanities and legal studies, so law school. So in other words, very, very complementary. The numbers are incredible in terms of enrollment, in excess of 70,000 undergraduate students, and then more than 10,000 at the graduate level. So they're doing a very fine job in educating the next generation of leaders in Ghana. Okay. And 2, something that's a little bit different from our, if you will, organizational pyramid, is that going old school British system, music falls under the umbrella of humanities and legal studies. Kind of more British system, and if we think back to medieval universities. So, right, the trivium and the quadrivium, so a little bit different. They have it, and 2, if you take a look at our numbers here, again, how the university grows, the music department wasn't established until the mid-1970s. So, with respect to quality, curriculum, program offerings, and so forth, they are a bit behind the curve, but working very diligently, if you will, to become current with other institutions across the continent and internationally. And 2, top-rated and very, very well received. So let's move this up a little bit. Here we are. So here's an example of the University of Cape Coast's, the music lab, besides where we have challenges. So we have majors in indigenous music. Okay. They have a young music technology program, a young music business program, and I take this much credit, just a quarter of an inch worth of credit for this. I met my cohorts at UCC in 2015 when I was actually carrying out other duties for the African Deans Forum, and there was an international conference at the university in Mauritius, in Redouy, and that was where I met my cohorts, Dr. Abre from the Education Research Department, and his provost, Dr. Wilmot, who, by the way, Dr. Wilmot did his PhD at NSU. Yeah, so fascinating connection. And so an invitation was offered, come to Ghana, come to Cape Coast, and that's how, in other words, that's how the whole thing started, okay? So this is from a visit I made last year. In fact, March is National Heritage Month in Ghana, so it's a wonderful time in terms of everything with respect to creative and performing arts, and so the Ozabisa band, they're Ghanaians that are London-based, UK-based, and they had come home to Ghana, and they came to the university and did some master classes and played for the students. But you get a feel too from the screenshot that the university's music program is small, growing but small, and two, the focus tends to be, even though there is a music education program, it's significantly different from our methodologies here, and the focus tends to be on music tech. Okay. Wow, all right. So music tech, music business, but those are two. These are things that came out of our 2015 exchanges. And then the folk music, the indigenous music. So from this past spring, to in the screenshot, so it would be your upper left, the gentleman in the right of that shot is Dr. Florian Karl, and Florian is the HOD, the department chair for music at UCC. Wonderful man, and we've collaborated over time. So I'm talking to you about my work and our collaborations. So in the spring, they were honoring their own. So the Fante folk musicians, which absolutely marvelous. The talent level is amazing, but we have challenges. So what happened if we go back in time during Ghana's civil war and revolution? The view was that, and this is not necessarily just indicative of Ghana, but I'm pretty confident in saying that we see this across the continent. We have civil war, revolution, and then there is a school of thought that says, okay, we need to get back to the basics in terms of education, and there's an interrelationship between, or if you will, a tripart interrelationship between tertiary education, government, and the business community. So many programs are dictated by the needs of government and the needs of business, as opposed to something that is very near and dear to our hearts, which is education for the sake of learning. So in other words, the love of learning, the love of knowledge. It's like, well, yes, that's all well and good, but we need engineers. We need construction managers. We need business managers. So we have these types of issues. So that's, and two, some things that are a bit different, although maybe somewhat the same. In looking to boost, if you will, local level and national economies, the arts tend to fall to the wayside. Again, it's no, we need manufacturing, we need other types of infrastructure. So we are just at a place within the African continent, and too, I'd spent significant time in Botswana and South Africa, that all of a sudden government and business are recognizing the value of the creative and performing arts as driving the economy. So in other words, that entire entertainment segment, which here in the US, we're talking billions of dollars that are generated through arts and entertainment. So on the continent, it's like, there's an idea, yeah, right, we could make money on this. Yeah, let's do that. Oh, wait, but our standard isn't, if you will, isn't at a global level. It's, in other words, our artists aren't Beyonce. In other words, so we have a quality issue on, and see, why is that? Oh, yeah, right. During the revolution, yeah, we decided that music education wasn't necessary to the cause. That, if you will, that reading, writing, calculating sums was where we needed to be. That we needed those things first, which is certainly logical, but we all know the benefits of studying music and how those, if you will, facilitate other areas of learning. So that's what's happening now. That's kind of the crux of our situation. So here we go. Accra, the capital. Cape Coast is where we are. Here's our central region. But two, this is the entirety of Ghana. So for our project, we're focusing on the central region right now. And two, essentially, once you get past Cape Coast, out of town, you're essentially in the bush. That's probably the best way to describe it. And things that you and I take for granted are amazing. So,
I know what you mean.
you know, our cell phones, the fact that, yeah, yes, potable water, electricity. There's a big reliance on solar power. Once you get out of the cities, it's not unfathomable to have multiple electrical faults, outages, infrastructure, roads, and. So it's challenging. But there's some wonderful things going on. So what we are working on is reinstating music education in the primary schools. So we still have, again, once you get out of town, it's still schools under trees and children with slates, and so teachers using chalk and a slate board. Two, you can see the school building in the background, and yes, indeed, there's computer equipment there. But the other challenge is knowledge and capability and maintenance. Two, a lot of the computer equipment is old and out of date. Some of it, if I have a concern with this laptop, I can call our CNIT department and they are on the case. These folks don't have that luxury. If something gets broken, it's close the case and they set it aside in a closet and they go back to the old slate and the chalk until someone comes along. So this too is part of what we are working toward change. Also, going back to that map, if you think about it, delivery of instructional materials to the teachers is a challenge. Most of it has to, again, travel is not easy, so, and to either direction. So in service for teachers to come to, let's say, example, this campus. In fact, this weekend, our department, we're having an in-service for middle school choral conductors. Right, so, in other words, professional development, in-service, and training, and so on and so forth, is a challenge. One of the best ways we can deliver is through online portals. So that's also part of what my colleagues and I are working on. So, delivery, so lesson plans, professional development, software that can be used. Now, in the urban areas, so for example, in Cape Coast, Dr. Aubre's children have the benefit of a very good primary school that has a computer lab. But that lab's funded by the university, so it's essentially a university school. Again, once you get out of town, those types of things change, and that's what we are working to resolve and to move forward. Two, in terms of music education, where our music education majors have 2 semesters of practicum, right? So an entire year worth of student teaching, plus the methods courses. So instrumental methods, choral methods, foundations of music education, and. In other words, a standalone degree. Students in the African diaspora that are, if you will quote, majoring in music education receive a 1-semester catch-all course entitled music. A 15-week semester where they learn to play recorder, learn to read music notation, music theory, and somehow learn to share, to teach. That's it. They receive 1 semester of, quote, art that is the same thing. So painting, sculpture, right? The whole 9 yards. And then they are expected to step in front of a class, okay, general ed classroom, and teach all of this. Those that have, I want to move this up a little bit, those that have some expertise will teach the areas in which they are most confident. So for example, if they grew up in a musical household and learned to play, learned to read, they'll teach music. If they didn't, then they kind of circumvent it and they'll focus more on art, or they'll focus on folk elements to kind of get them through the situation. So as a result, you have students that don't have a good foundation at the lower division. Then when you get to junior and senior secondary schools, music is offered, but it's elective. And 2, how we value music, not many enroll because, and 2, this is something that we hear on our side as well. Oh, well, all right, that's, it's a nice entertainment thing, but you're not going to be able to get a job. Yeah, no, don't waste your time taking a music class. Take business mathematics. In other words, take accounting. Take business law. Take something else that's going to generate the promise of a solid, good-paying job when you graduate. So, also our challenge. So, And here, all right, so picture-wise, not the greatest, but this is Dr. Aubrey, this is Dr. Wilmot, and this is me. So there you go. Yes, the Trinity. So what we are doing through ICT delivery of instructional materials, we're working with CAPA teachers to, if you will, raise the bar in terms of their learning experience and to give confidence so they can more effectively teach the subject matter. We're also working with both the U.S. and the Ghanaian embassy, along with Ghana's Musicians Guild and a couple of other entities in country, the Education Ministry and Health and Human Services, to get music education restored to the primary school curriculum. So that's what's going on with us. The other reason for it has to do with these things, and things that we don't even talk about on this side of the Atlantic. Once upon a time, these let's see. So we're now calling them Sustainable Development Goals. Back when this whole initiative started, they were known as the Millennial Development Goals. The sad part is no country, even the U.S., as great as we are as superpower nation, none met the Millennial Development Goal standards. No one hit the mark. So UNESCO came along and revised them, and they became known as the SDGs, the Sustainable, or past 2015, and that was part of my work in Mauritius with ADUF in 2015. Okay, we've not hit our mark. We've not met the standard. Okay, what can we do to revise and revamp it and move things forward? So we decided that we would go another 15 years. So we are now at 2030, and the SDGs are interchangeably known as the 2030 Agenda. So let's see, total, we've got 17 goals, and so our work is focusing on quality education, improving the curriculum standards and so on and so forth, and then 2, that ability to turn an artistic endeavor, if you will, your creative passion, into a successful business. And this is happening in other parts of the continent. So for example, southern Nigeria. Lagos carries the nickname or the moniker of Nollywood because of the film industry there that has blossomed in the last 10 years or so. South Africa's music industry is producing some very fine artists, some wonderfully talented artists, and they are in a position where they are actually, if you're breaking down barriers and getting their music off the continent and becoming internationally known. So in other words, they're starting to make some serious money. So, in other words, 2, that business model. And 2, this was a huge part of my time as a Fulbrighter in Botswana, launching music business curriculum at the university there, and working with artists, local artists, to develop their business plans, and to make them more cognizant of their work product, in other words, their art, their creative processes, and to get paid for it, as opposed to artists that would play a club and their compensation was dinner and 2 drinks. But to actually be paid for their work. And then two, again, so the industry infrastructure, and this too, the other entity that helped, if you will, fan the fires for our project is the hospitality and tourism industry on the continent, but particularly Ghana, and two, on the heels of the First Lady's recent visit to Cape Coast. My colleagues have stories about that. But now, Cape Coast is a smoking hot tourist destination. Same thing, actually now, so thank you Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan, Botswana is now a hot ticket if you want to go on safari and. So these types of changes. And then two, if you will, here we talk about diversity and inclusiveness awareness. So these types of changes with respect to inequality across the landscape of, in our case, Ghanaian society, what's valued and what isn't. Things that we don't think about. We put a lot of assumptions out there about music that's always going to be there for us, right? You can turn on the radio in the car, you can go to a concert, pick whether it's Elton John or the Detroit Symphony or Ramsey Lewis Trio, those entities are always going to be there. You know, that's something you can count on. That's not necessarily the case in other places. And two, how we view creative artists. So, for example, in Ghana, while music itself is valued and very much part of societal fabric, the folks that make it, yeah, not so much. They are, if you will, lower in the pecking order. So we are working to change, again, through education, through these initiatives, to change that mindset. I think about how we revere talented artists here. It doesn't necessarily matter that if we're talking about music or not, whether it's music or visual art or literature, poetry, dance. Misty Copeland comes to mind because she has a cameo appearance in the upcoming, actually I think it's out now, the Disney movie, the Nutcracker. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, no, that.
See it, thanks for
Yeah, so these types of things, and then two, the current saying on my email signature, and I can't take credit for it, but alone we are smart, together we are brilliant. The concept of partnership, coalition building, part of the SDGs, but very much part of what we're doing. If things move forward along the trajectory that we hope, we will be implementing study abroad components, so our students can go to UCC and help out in the training of CAPA teachers, so they could do a semester's study abroad as part of their practicum. Conversely, students from UCC could come here as part of a study abroad and have a deeper understanding of our music education initiatives both on campus, and to see how music education both at primary and secondary school levels functions in, if you will, real time, in a real school environment here. To support what we're doing, again, the partnership, so my cohort, Dr. Abre, has founded an NGO, a nonprofit. So we are not solely reliant on government and institutional funding to get things off the ground. So in other words, I suppose, yes, in informal language, we're working both sides of the street. But two, so he has done some small things already with primary schools and education initiatives. So he's received some small grants to get, again, to hardware and software, updates, equipment in primary schools farther outside in the region as opposed to just Cape Coast. And then some of the things that are happening. So for example, the university has an interesting choir. Okay. Kunimo is his quartet. He has been a long-standing musical celebrity in the region, and two, very outspoken about the importance of education, music education, and if you'll taking ownership of your work, and then two, festival time. So I pulled some things for us to listen to. We're actually doing pretty good here. That's great. A lot of what you hear is popular music. In Ghana, the traditional, so if you will, the mix of, if you will, British and indigenous music. The term is high life. And so we have this mix of brass instruments, many of which were police units and military, with indigenous music, with folk instruments, and the guitar sound that you hear from the West African coast. What has happened with high life, and I have an example. Thank you very much. Picked the 1980s, 90s, and the rap hip hop phenomenon, is that there's, if you will, a third stream, and it's called hip life. So that cross-pollinates high life and hip hop. So let's see if I can manage the. I wanted to show you at least a little bit of the university choir. Let's see, or you can hear them. I have to remember what I'm supposed to do here. Stopping place.
They have more women than men.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. Honestly, that's a challenge for church choirs here.
Oh, it is, yeah, that is true. Very true.
So then if I can get back to are, okay. So, I need to get back to my slideshow. There we go. Let's get out of, there we go, okay.
Title of the next song is The Industry of the Ant. The ant eats, the elephant eats. But if you have the patience to dissect an ant, you find its liver. Thank you. Sasa breku na kuna mupe aye breku sasa breku na kuna mupe aye akomo ba madiache obreku ene yeno akomo ba madiache Akomo, brekomo, sasa breko na bona mope aye. Akomo, brekomo, sasa breko na bona mope aye. Akomo ba madiache, obreke, enayeno. Akomo ba madiache. Before what Tertiary. Since you are not finding who the answer, Tertiary to something if you are down, he said, we are to see it every day. So, Trevor, no, if so, Yasaphobia, one who see it. Akomo, brekomo, Sasa breku, never namope, aye.
So, some of the things that you hear, so the call and response patterns, the guitar work, the drums, and the layered rhythmic patterns, but too, you can see how well this performance was attended. Huge festival, huge audience.
Yeah.
Where?
This is Cape Coast.
It's in Cape Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an outside location?
Yes.
It looks like it.
Most of the performances are.
They don't have auditoriums in the school? Do they have them, like performances?
What you find are, or from our own elementary school, the gym and cafetorium. In other words, the multi-purpose space. It's a primary school. The wealthier districts in the senior secondary schools have small auditoriums and theaters. So it depends on where you are within the country. So within Accra, within Cape Coast, yeah, at senior secondary school level, you'll find performance spaces. Once if you will get out of the city limits, no. And too big, in fact, the last example, I have to get back to my slideshow. Let's see here. This last example, I can get it to pull up, is another festival in Cape Coast. As soon as I get rid of... Let's see. I should be expert at this by now. That's one of, if you will, the national colors.
Oh, is that on the flag?
Mm.
Orange? No, I was just curious.
Yeah. So that, folks, is what's happening in my little corner of campus. Yeah, I'm just gonna close everything out. And
You never did, you have the group right there playing. Do you have their performance, one right there in the middle there?
oh, that's actually one of the festival groups.
You didn't record them?
I didn't record them.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And then, yeah, so this is what's hot and trending right now. And you're going, well, wait a minute. So if you took away the in Ghana part from the poster, pretty much, yeah, and pretty much looks like something you'd find on this side of the Atlantic.
That's what it says, throughout West Africa and abroad on the caption there, on the side there.
Yep,
And especially in the United Kingdom, the United States and Canada and Germany.
Yeah, so the two, again, across the continent, well, two. Popular music is one of our country's hugest exports.
Oh,
So that interrelationship between, if you will, the local culture and then what if you will, what filters in. So my time in Botswana and South Africa, I'm hearing Ed Sheeran on the radio. I'm hearing Beyonce. You pick, right? And honestly, that was one of the challenges and the criticisms from the local artists. They were dismayed and frustrated. Well, why should we even try? Because we can't get airplay on the radio stations for our music, even if we produce something stellar, and it's our own country, we're competing with Lady Gaga, Beyonce, Ed Sheeran, Adele. Oh gosh, I heard so much Adele on the radio, I thought I was going to lose my mind. So that too is a challenge, and two, musicians making their case to government ministries about how do we regulate. In fact, too, while I was there, Jonathan Butler, so the jazz artist Jonathan Butler, came and performed. And so we have these types of issues. Oh geez, what do I want to add? Sorry about that, let's get rid of this. So we have artists that come into the country, perform, leave, and take the money with them. So that too is a challenge. No, I don't want to do that either. So there we go. We'll just go to a blank screen. So, folks, thank you so much for being here. It was very kind of you. Appreciate it. Anything you want to talk about?
I was curious about when you showed the picture at the early part of your talk of the students in the outer limits of the geographical area from the city. You know, they were sitting on the ground. You know, you said that they were right outside the city, and that's why they had such a. But they were so remote, you know. That's why they had such a low level of materials and everything. I was wondering exactly how far geographically are they from the University of Cape, the regular geographical area where the money is at, you know?
They're within 25 miles of the university. So yeah, and two, textbooks, things that we take for granted, incredibly expensive. Students share textbooks, and I don't mean like 2 students sharing a textbook, I mean 10 students sharing a textbook. So, by way of analogy, my time in Botswana, at the cathedral in Gaborone, I had asked for a hymnal so I could sing along, particularly in Setswana, which is not a native tongue. The entire cathedral had only 4 hymnals. Yeah, things that we take for granted. If you go to church, you're looking at a pew rack full of hymnals and prayer books. We don't have that. Textbooks. We are always on top of having the latest edition for our students, the best resources, and. During my time, oh well, let's use the resources we have in the library. We have textbooks, okay. The copyright on many of them was from the late 1950s and the early 1960s. So I was actually emailing cohorts here. Can you send? I had taken some things with me, but okay. So can you pack up a box of books? Get me this, and ship it to me. And in other words, you're going to be making a charitable contribution. We don't realize how fortunate we are. Things that we take for granted. So yeah, paper, pencils, cell phones. A lot of folks, we love our technology. What you will see there are these tiny little Nokia, they call them jelly bean phones because they're all brightly colored, and folks that are still using Blackberries. There's this great wealth disparity, if you will, the 99% and the 1%. And we see it in allocation of educational resources. That's part of our challenge with the remote areas in the Central District. Yeah, of course we're going to fund in Accra and Cape Coast because we've got urban areas and yeah, the better educated. But the folks, if you will, in the home villages, yeah, okay. Nah, not so much. They're still going, the prevailing view is that they're still going to be farmers or herders, right? I wish I had taken a picture. The university, you saw the entrance, and it's a closed campus, which is also an interesting experience coming from our institution. It's an open campus. So you saw the gatehouse and the main entrance, and if you don't have credentials or if you're not with someone from the university, you don't get in. Just beyond that, and we're running right along the coast, along the Atlantic, on the road.
You mean on the outside?
Mm-hmm. There is, you and I would call it, we would call it a squatter's village. It's a tribal village, right there on the university grounds. And I said to Dr. Aubrey, and I said, well, what's up with that? Why do I see? He said, well, the government took the land and ceded it to the university so we could build, and there was a disagreement with the chief, and they have set their village there and they refuse to move. So they've just parked themselves there, and you can watch them go across the road to the beach, and they gather driftwood and cut it into bundles to sell. They fish and they sell fish. They sell and package maize. Okay, I know it as mealie meal. So folks can buy that to make porridge or bread. They also bake bread and sell it. So just right there along the road on what in theory is university property, but they've refused to cede their village. So it's a fascinating thing to witness.
Does the university attempt to recruit some of those people?
No.
That would be a good strategy to bring them along. One of the things, there was a talk here earlier this week. Today's Thursday, I think the talk was on Tuesday about the history of Wayne State University, and apparently there was that sort of tension that Wayne State displaced a lot of people, and it took time, and over the years that history has dissipated. But one of the professors who attended the talk remembered that tension that was created when the university took the land.
You always seem to have that type of problem with, a larger conglomerate trying to take over and expand.
Yes,
I remember back a long time ago.
Eminent domain is a kind of
Yeah, eminent domain. I remember when, back in the, what is it, in the last century, I know, what was it, the 90s or something, or the 80s, I think it was the 80s, when they tried to build, when GM decided to build that Pole Town plant, every night on the news, they had all these Polish people, or whatever, people who lived in that region in Hamtramck. They were fighting in the GM tooth and nail, to try and keep them from having their houses torn down and the community completely disrupted and scattered. And GM just kept on fighting them, and GM of course won. But I'm just saying they vehemently rejected it, though. I mean, GM's proposal to expand and build that. And GM kept saying, well, we're going to add jobs in this area in the community. But the people didn't want their homes torn down,
Well, dude, it was just a few years ago that it came out that, yeah, GM was wrong, and those people were actually better compensated, or they received additional compensation for their loss. Yeah, this came out, I'm going to say within the last 18 months.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
What about Black Bottom?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Paradise Valley?
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Well, too, I'd asked both Dr. Aubrey and Dr. Wilmot about it, and he said, well, we can't force them to leave. It's, historically, it's their land. And they also pointed out that well, the village actually performs a very important service for our students. UCC does not have residential housing like we do here. There is some, but not enough to accommodate 70-some thousand students. So, wouldn't that be a nice problem to have? So many of the students live, they're again like our students. They are living close by and commuting in. So the students will stop they'll stop and shop.
Stop and shop, yeah, that's good.
From the villages, yeah. And so they have, if you will, reached their own version of détente. Some of the art, the village too. If you cross the road and go down to the beach, the dugout canoes for my own self, I would not get in one of those things. But okay, like Polynesia, if you've been in the islands, right? And they go out and fish. So yeah, I saw students that would stop and like we use, pick click list or write online ordering. I would see them stop and you'd hear the great conversation, and there'd be an exchange of some SETI, but they're not walking away. So I said to the doctor, what just happened there? And he just placed his grocery order. So he'll have fish and maize meal and coconut ready when he comes back from class. Oh, okay. So very different.
Any other questions?
I have a lot of questions, but I know we don't have a ton of time. I'll just say thank you so much for your talk, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing there. I myself have worked in Ghana for about 20 years.
Okay.
And my wife also works in Ghana. She's also in the history department here. Jennifer Hart, you may know her.
Okay.
So I've particularly worked on music and dance in Ghana. I worked with the national dance companies.
Okay.
I wrote a book called Staging Ghana. I don't know if you've run across it, but I've also worked closely with Catty Coe, who you probably know. She wrote a book on music and dance and culture in schools in Ghana. I don't know if you work with Catty at all.
Mike does, Dr. Allen.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
she's still, I mean, I know she's moved on to other projects, but it's good to know that she's still involved in the K through 12 education system there. So I guess, I have so many questions, but I guess sort of moving forward, your overall goal is is it a national goal that you guys are actually, working to reinstate music programs in Ghana nationally at a national level? So working with the Ministry of Education to do this nationally, and has it been reinstated via law yet, or is it still legally? Is it sort of not? Is music really not officially part of K through 12 education still in Ghana?
Okay. Our overarching goal is nationally, and that's why we're working with the education ministry and the embassies on both sides. We have a lot of work to do. So our initial, if you will, our initial phase and rollout is in the central district. So getting into the rural areas there, then moving forward. So in other words, to the other districts within the country. So I suppose our work in the central district will be the litmus test with respect to how successful are we going to be in capacitation of the CAPA teachers. In other words, are we going to be able to break down barriers and resistance? Because you know how we love to get into a habit, and if I can kind of get by and not fully teach CAPA subjects, then why do I want to do something different? So this is, if you will, the first phase. Then based upon our success in the central region, we have earmarked, if you will, the next phases in dissemination of information in service, professional development, and.
So is this something then that is being implemented, via law, or is it, are there actual policies by the government now that are saying yes, music needs to be back in curriculum? Is there any sort of rolling out sort of standards, right? Like we have here you know, K through 12 standards of education that mandate, well, they did. I mean, of course, Detroit has a similar situation, right, where most music programs have been, you know, abolished in Detroit for the last 20 or 30 years. So is it similar there, where it's like, you know, these music programs are not mandated by law, therefore, if there are budget cuts, then that music and art are the first thing that sort of go.
That
But
go, right.
can we work to, or are you working to sort of create kind of national standards and also sort of national laws that would say you have to have a music and arts program in your core curriculum, right?
Yeah, exactly, and so that is a significant part of the agenda, and so Dr. Aubrey, who's a professor in the Center for Education Research at UCC. So his area of expertise, we're working together with respect to curriculum mapping to standards and with the government ministries and with the embassies, so that we have all of the stakeholders on board, and to the Musicians Guild, because they're the ones that started this, if you will, they started the fracas last July, which, I shouldn't call it a fracas, I suppose, but truly the call to action with respect to reinstating music education in the primary schools. So, this is not a short-term project for us. This is a long-term endeavor.
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, it's a massive endeavor. You know, so I mean, I'm just trying to, you know, it's like, obviously, I mean, there must be other. You must be working with a lot of other partners, not just within Ghana, but also internationally. UNESCO, you said, is sort of the impetus, right, for a lot of it, and assume lends some funding to the whole endeavor. But I'm wondering, sort of like, if you've got is your team built through people that are coming through UNESCO, or are you drawing on, you know, people nationally and internationally from Europe or America, that you have like committees and, you know, consortiums of people who are working on this project? Yeah.
Besides I pared things down because we have limited time. So besides UNESCO, are you familiar with WIRA? So we're working, cohorts at WIRA.
What's it? I'm not.
World Education Research Association is WIRA.
Are they part of what organization are they related to? They're not related to the UN.
No, my initial conference presentations at WIRA came from colleagues within WIRA and within University of Pretoria in South Africa.
Yeah.
So, hey, are you going to do this? You should do this. So UNESCO, WIRA, ADEF. There's somebody else I'm missing in the list. Oh, TESA, for heaven's sakes. TESA, that's teacher education in South Africa, and TESA also deals with the ICT component and online course delivery. So we have an interesting collection of.
And this is a project that you've been working on just for the last few years, then, like.
Yeah, we started, well, since 2012, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I've been plowing the field for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I wish you a lot of luck, because it's such a massive undertaking. You know, I know how difficult it is in America to get, or in Detroit particularly, to get music reinstated,
Yeah.
you know, and arts programs reinstated in schools in America. I know that.
Well,
Across
I mean,
the country, yeah.
yeah,
You know, in Ghana, I can imagine. I mean, I've also worked in the city. I've worked a lot in Accra, but I've also worked in the villages as well. So, particularly in Volta region, and Cape Coast to some extent, and the eastern region. But,
The two of you should get to know each
yeah.
other.
yeah, absolutely.
Did you know of
No, I didn't.
That's-
Surprisingly, no.
That's one of the benefits of,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
Brown Bag series. It's amazing. Several times I've seen this happen, but
Yeah.
I didn't know that you were here.
Yeah, it's
And,
surprising. Yeah.
Jennifer Hart, I thought that she would come to this.
Well,
talk
she's
because
teaching right now. She's actually teaching a class right now.
Yeah,
So.
but she's a very good ambassador there. She does amazing work and in history, mainly about transportation, but other things.
Oh,
too.
okay.
Yeah. But my last question is that that rural urban difference in which I'm from a place called Guyana, which is of course the other
French,
part.
yeah.
And what you are narrating right there is exactly what happens if you're in Georgetown, things are pretty modern, but you step outside of Georgetown, and the University of Guyana is a little bit outside of Georgetown, but 5 miles, 5 miles east of University of Guyana, you will be surprised how primitive things are. Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
And even the dancing, I mean, of course, you see the African diaspora, the same things happening with music in Guyana, and sort of things are very much Americanized. I mean, the influence of American culture is absolutely amazing. Not only the music, but the dress and the philosophies and so on.
Well, and two, you know, one of the challenges is conquering the mindset of right, too much American culture, too much European
Yeah.
culture. All right, so if you will, the hue and cry, Africa's for Africans. Okay. Certainly, of course. But we're,
yes, yes.
but we are, like it or not, we're a globalized society, and you have to strike the balance.
Well, even Nkrumah said this, you know, like, even Nkrumah when he was coming up with, you know, touting African personality, right? I mean, he wasn't calling for a complete rejection of Western culture, right? He understood, and in Ketia, I'm sure you've run across Kobeni and Ketia in your work, right? You know, I mean, he worked with Nkrumah during that nationalist period, you know, in the 1960s, and they, you know, they were not naive to think that they could just completely abolish or eradicate Western culture. That wasn't their model at all, especially since Nketia was a well-trained, classically Western-trained, you know, musician, right, pianist and composer, and appreciated Western culture on that level. So, you know, there wasn't ever, at least in some African countries, yes, there were more sort of, sort of trying to do away with Western culture, but after, you know, but Nkrumah and Ketia were sophisticated enough to know that, you know, they're smart enough to know that, like, we are a globalized society, and we have been for a long time, and you're not, those things are so, you know, the West and Africa, like it or not, even though the circumstances were, of course, you know, let's say less than ideal, to put it in probably the worst possible way, but, you know, nevertheless, you know, those cultural aspects were, you know, hybridized from hundreds and hundreds of years, right? So you can't just undo that kind of history. You know, you have to take those things into account. And so, you know, I think, you know, going forward, you have to recognize that Ghanaian culture is always kind of has been Western culture to some degree. And I think it can be an advantage if you're trying to, you know, sort of break these artists, you know, let's say like a hip life artist, right? You know, Nketiah's grandson is a hip life artist, you know, who's actually based in the US now, he lives in Minnesota. You know, so some of those folks, you know, they can actually kind of break in the West because they have that sort of Western, you know, training, if you will, all their life. You know, I think, and that's one thing, you know, in Ghana, you've got English as your official language, so you could use, you know, a lot of these hip life artists made a big deal about rapping in Tree or Ewe or something, or a local
Right.
language, but if they rapped in English, you know, they could potentially cross over
They were
into
more
a
marketable.
bigger market. So, and there's so many things. You're
Well,
probably,
and, you know, in the final analysis, our project is about lifelong learning and poverty reduction. That's, you know, that's the end game.
yeah, I mean, it's
You know,
not so much.
you know, musical knowledge and expertise aside, it's about best utilizing talent and skill to be productive, you know, productive members of, if you will, the body corporate, and to use that skill to, to buy groceries and pay the car note at the end of the
Yeah.
month. Just to set a little aside and
Do you find yourself in Ghana making the same arguments or similar arguments that you would make in the US in terms of why music is important for
sure.
early childhood development and education in general? It's
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
the same arguments of, oh, well, it you know, it increases cognitive development in general and blah, blah, blah. But
Spatial relationships,
Yeah.
math skills, the whole 9 yards. You know, it's that societal view that music is this wonderfully entertaining thing, but you can't get a job,
yeah.
right?
But it's not about that even, it's about
It's-
look how it actually enhances learning generally, right? So, you know, you find the same thing in America where people don't appreciate, administrators don't end up appreciating the value of music to enhance education and to enhance learning abilities and to overcome learning challenges or whatever, you know, what have you. There's just so many benefits beyond just learning a skill.